Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
You may think of storytelling as an art, but current scientific research tells us what great storytellers have known for ages. Storytelling is a superpower. When we hear facts, two areas of our brain light up, but stories increase our brain activity fivefold. Hello, Mataki Epi, and welcome to Hochoka, here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus. I'm Scott Wooster, today's Hochoka host. We're glad you have joined our circle with Joseph Marshall III. Joe worked with us in seasons 1 and 2, and he returns today to contribute his unique wisdom in an area he knows well. In just a few days from our taping, Joseph will receive the Owen Wister Award from the Western Writers of America Conference for lifetime contributions to Western literature. Previous honorees include Pulitzer Prize winners N. Scott Momaday, Louise Erdrich, and countless others. He will also be inducted into the Western Writers Hall of Fame. Welcome back, Joseph.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, we talked a little bit off camera, and I kind of geeked out about the award. That's right. A pretty prestigious award.
It really is, and I was shocked to get the news several months ago, and I'm still a little bit in shock because of the previous honorees, as you mentioned a couple of them, and some of them are native writers, and the list is long and very prestigious, and I'm really surprised and humbled to be part of it.
Absolutely. A lot of heroes on that list.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked about it a little bit in the header, but scientific research on the power of storytelling has exploded.
Right.
You and I know from reading books all our lives that what it does, what it makes us feel like, but there's actual research into what it does with the brain, and a simple Google floods the screen with all sorts of information about how a good story engages more parts of the brain.
Absolutely.
Releases chemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, cortisol, leads to emotional behavior change. One estimate says that facts well told as stories are recalled up to 22 times more than when given as data alone. Right. Again, we didn't know this when we fell in love with storytelling.
No, of course not.
And began to write things down, or how that was affecting us and you as your grandparents told you stories.
Right.
What drew you into this art and now science, would you say?
Oh, well, it was just the way my grandparents and their and all the storytellers that were part of my early childhood, the way they were able to really excite your imagination and make you create images in your own mind. And not only that, all the emotions that went with it, fear, anger, surprise, satisfaction, whatever, anxiety, tension. They were able to convey all of that just simply by how they told a story. Obviously, the words they used, the story itself, the characters in the story. To me, it was something I always look forward to hear any one of them, say, "Come here, I want to tell you a story."
Yeah.
They didn't have to tell me twice.
Right.
I was always hanging around the edges, listening to all the elders talk, simply because I knew sooner or later one of them would launch into a story.
Yeah. And you'll hear, I'm sure you've heard, I know I have, your children and your Tekoja over the years will say, Grandpa or Dad, tell us a story.
Exactly.
Hear that all the time.
Right.
So for our audience here at Hochoka, we're going to engage in sort of a storytelling workshop with you, and what we would want our listeners to know, and what you can tell them if you would, is what types of stories do you consider to be a big part of Lakota storytelling tradition, and the second part is what functions do they serve?
Right. Well, there are probably 4 or 5 general kinds of stories. And I think most Lakota stories fall in one or more of those categories. And one is the origin story or creation story.
Yep.
And there's several of those.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is how the 7 bands of the Lakota came to be. They were living in a hole in the Black Hills, and they emerged. These 7 brothers emerged, and then thus they formed the 7 bands of Lakota. That's an example of a creation story. Or the eagle story, where the eagle rescues a young woman who's alone after a flood, and together they recreate, the whole race of people. So all those, there's several of those kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's a family or the community history, or the band history. Those are most prevalent because every family has a history. Mm-hmm. Every family has ancestors that go way back. So the elders in the family tell the children and grandchildren the stories of their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. So, that's to keep the family, a sense of family alive, mm-hmm. and reinforce and give young people a sense of identity. And then there are the instructive or teaching stories. Mm-hmm. They're very simple. They're not so much stories to entertain, they're stories to teach a certain kind of skill, a certain kind of technique, or, for example, something as simple as how to harvest buffalo berries. Mm-hmm. Because buffalo berries, if you know them at all, they have thorns. So you can't just reach in there and pick them up. Mm-hmm. So you have to find a way to do that, and that's, unless you learn the right way, then yeah, you're going to be sorry. But so along comes a mother or grandmother and tells a story that engages a young person to show them how to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that is very important. It goes along with the family stories, and that's a hero story, where there are stories about both men and women, mm-hmm. who actual men and women, ancestors or members of the community or some other, who have done something notable or heroic or significant that is worth telling everybody.
Yep.
And some of those characters are like Crazy Horse. I mean, he's at a level that's way up there, but also it's among the families and bands where people have done something really interesting, like the woman who used her husband's bow to rescue her daughter. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it needs more elaboration, but that's a kind of an example of. So those are the kinds of stories that are in Lakota, in the old tradition.
Right. And you mentioned the instructive story.
Right.
As a way to teach maybe the next generation or teach anybody who wants to know, really.
Exactly.
But do you think, you mentioned it in terms of skills, mm-hmm. that type of thing, but also morals, values, that type of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. And the ubiquitous Iktomi stories, the trickster stories, is what those stories do.
Right.
They always have a lesson to offer, a moral to pass on.
Yeah. Some
characteristic to elaborate on.
Yeah. And in your writing, you've been at this for a long time. You've got a lot of books that many that have been published, but I'm also assuming many that have been written that are kept for yourself or for your family.
Exactly.
You've probably used all these forms of writing,
sure.
these different ways,
sure.
and told stories in those ways.
Yeah.
Your family history has been told through your lens.
Exactly.
So, and I mentioned off camera that I've been working on a book myself,
okay.
and it's a family history
sure.
book, not my family history, but my wife's, who's
okay.
Sichangu, right?
Yeah.
Lorraine is Sichangu,
right.
and it's a little pitiful that I'm the guy that ended up writing it. I have writers in the family, and I pitched it to every one of them, and they all said, "You might be better suited to write that book," and so it ended up. It's sorry when the least of us has to pick up the mantle, but you go ahead and do it, right? So, so coach me here a little bit with the writing, because I'm not done. I mean, all it did writing one is stoke the fire to continue writing. It's just exciting to do it, but whether it gets read or published or any of that kind of stuff, it's just fun to write.
Absolutely.
I find. What are the components in your mind of putting together a compelling story?
And this is in no particular order, but these are the components of a good story. One, it has to do with character. The characters have to be interesting. Or if you're writing a biography, for example, you pick somebody who's led a notable life or did something significant so that the story is engaging and compelling. Or if you're creating a fictional character, then you can give them whatever kind of situation you want to make that person interesting to the reader. It has to be interesting to you first as the writer.
Right.
But so that you can convey that to the reader.
Yeah.
The other thing is event or events. Something has to happen.
Yeah.
That has to be compelling and woven throughout, interspersed with the character and the characters and the setting and all the other factors in a story. But usually, for example, a hero story that we're used to, and there are a lot of those, where there's always a journey, where somebody has to accomplish something, or achieve something, or find something, or right or wrong, but it involves a journey from A to B, physically or emotionally.
Yep.
So that's another kind. So it has to be an event, something happening all the time, something moving all the time.
Yep.
The other is a moral. There has to be a moral in the story. There has to be a reason for the story. Or if it teaches, for example, courage, what courage is about or not, or what even the dark aspects of our human character, it could be about that too. But and so that offers a lesson, whether it's either how to do something or how not to do something.
Right.
So either way you want to go. And then, of course, as a writer, you have to be sure that you move it along. The story has to move. There has to be actual motion, but also over a landscape, for example. But you have to get that sense of movement, whether it's emotionally or physically. So the descriptive details have to be there.
Yep.
You have to be very exact in what you're talking about. Colors are very necessary because colors represent certain things to us. Red can represent anger.
Yep.
Blue can represent calm. Or green can represent peace. Or black can represent tension or something else, that can really engage the mind. So you need to use all of those things and make sure that you use the right kind of adjectives to describe an event, the character, or the setting.
Yeah.
So all of those have to be a part of that. And the last thing is that you need to know what kind of value that goes along with the moral. What kind of value are you teaching in that story? Are you teaching about motherly love? Or are you teaching about compassion? Are you teaching about something that, is intrinsically a part of us? So that has to be part of the story too.
Those are all great. The color piece, I wouldn't have thought. That doesn't come to mind. So that's really interesting. You brought that up.
Absolutely,
it's very strong.
It is.
And the other word that popped out too was landscapes.
Exactly.
And in light of this prestigious group that you'll join tomorrow, the Western Writers, that's such a big part of where they come from. And we always think in terms of a word or the phrase spiritual geography, right? Where you're from, how does that landscape look, and how does that tie into your story?
Exactly. And especially with native groups, the land is so much a part of us anyway. So to us, that the setting or the landscape is even more important. Because of that. Absolutely.
It makes or breaks a story in a lot of ways.
It does.
So I work with students. I've been a counselor for 30 years and have taught guidance classes. And when I was 25 and thrown into my first guidance class, I was stuck trying to figure out how to make the kids come alive and learn things. And when a 13-year-old is not alive in a classroom, you can look out and see that you've either got them or you don't. And over the course of doing this, I found out that it's almost 100% storytelling. I could come in with a
Yep.
PowerPoint, I could
Yep.
come in with facts, and they're
Right.
gone
Oh,
every
yeah.
time. But if I can
Absolutely.
tell a story,
Yep.
and they're leaning just like you were at the campfire. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you're waiting for your
Exactly.
grandparents to tell that story. They're leaning forward, their eyes
Sure.
are open, and
Sure.
they want that. I a lot of times I will go in. Now the class will get over. They'll go back to their house parents here on campus, and the house parents will say, "What'd you learn
Yeah.
from Scott today?" Well, I don't know. I have no idea. But he told a great story.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Sure.
And it's
Yeah.
a way to make learning. It kind of just
Sure.
gets in your DNA or gets
Yeah.
in your system without you even realizing that you're learning. And it was the same for me when I was a
Exactly.
kid,
When you
too.
stop to think about it, stories are as old as any human institution there is.
Yep.
Because when communication first happened, when language became cohesive, coherent, people began to exchange ideas, exchange stories,
Yep.
even little stories.
Yeah.
So it goes back a long ways. It's intrinsically a part. It is in our DNA.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the way we communicated and entertained each other for God knows how long. So television and movies and video games, those are just really newcomers
Yeah.
to the situation, even though they're all consuming.
Yeah.
But what they rely on is storytelling.
Storytelling. Yep.
Yeah,
I
at the
agree.
core of it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So we're going to do something, you and I, in a real time, building a story here.
Okay.
And if you're game for it, and
Sure.
so I'm going to drop a scenario. Give you a character that is semi-fictional. Let's put it that way, and then we'll build on where
Okay.
this story might go. What you would think you would be able to do, because you've said
Right.
every story has a
Yeah.
good character, has a plot that moves, events, landscape, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of a student who's 16 years old. He's Lakota, raised by his grandfather. He grew up around ceremonies. His grandfather's a Sundance
Okay.
leader.
Okay.
He attends a residential school. Grandpa wanted him to have some of those benefits that would offer, and thought that would be a good move for him. When the child is old enough, when he comes of age, 15, 16, maybe even a little earlier than that, he gets to go into his first sweat lodge with Grandpa into the Inipi, and doesn't even make it till the first door is closed.
Okay.
Something isn't right for him, whether it's a physical thing or whatever. He leaves and doesn't go back to it, finds himself succumbing to peer pressure, marijuana especially, and he finds himself flunking his classes in school, which he's never done. He's a capable student, and all of a sudden he's got some decisions that he needs to make about his
Okay.
future. What can
Okay.
we make of something like that?
Well, to me, it's the classic fork in the road.
Yeah.
The way this young man was raised and influenced by his grandfather, but still has gone away to school and seen the other aspect of his total life. He is Lakota. He probably his grandfather, obviously, in our story, is very traditional. So maybe he even knows a little bit of the language. So there is that influence that probably happened early on when he was just a child.
Yeah.
But then along comes the outside world, as it were, which happens to a lot of young people,
Yeah,
Lakota young,
absolutely.
indigenous Lakota young people. So what it does is bring us to that point in our lives where we're forced to decide more or less which way are we going to go. Are we going to and it's especially difficult because we're still young, we're still children. We haven't reached that time in our lives where we can make really informed decisions. So we're just kind of pulled along by all the factors that are there, and they're there. he uses marijuana. Maybe he gets in trouble for it. Maybe he likes it. Mm-hmm. So all of those are very compelling reasons, and to me, it creates a lot of tension right off the bat.
Right.
Which way is this young man going to go? So we could take him down one road where he decides the outside world is not for him, which is what I decided at some point in my life.
Right.
So I'm gonna go back over here because it feels safer.
Yep.
But still, the outside world is still there and is very strong. It's very invasive. So at some point in his life, this young man will have to deal with that one way or another.
Yeah.
So all those factors are there. So we could take him down one of those forks.
Right.
We could tell a story of how, okay, he decides to go out into the world, see what's out there, and then he's going to be faced with the choice, okay, do I totally forget what I really am at my core and give it all up and just immerse myself into this new thing, or do I keep part of who I am? See, that's the classic dilemma that we as Lakota have and are still facing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you see that all the time.
Absolutely.
Here at St. Joseph's.
Yep.
So this has all the factors that you said, all the parts of that story are there. It's just a matter of deciding what's going to happen to this young man,
Right.
and what's going to happen because of his choices.
Yep. Yeah. There's so many. That's the thing that I love about stories is there's so many possibilities that you could do with that, and you, and everything that you've talked about, character you could build. You talked about his upbringing, his experiences.
Right.
That would be easy to flesh out a lot of those different things that happen with the kid when he's young. We talked about values. What's the moral of the story? It's pretty simple. It's laid out in front of you. Do you choose the Chankuluta? You choose the red road, or are you going to follow this path that maybe doesn't get you where you need to be? You've got an internal struggle that keeps the plot moving. You've got external struggles, maybe him going to parties or being faced with these different kind of things. I tend to think once you and you said it applies to this character would apply to all of the kids that I work with, or every human being that ever lived, because we all have those things, those internal and external struggles.
Yes.
So it's almost like they sort of write themselves,
Right.
and then it's up to the writer to fill in the good stuff, the details of all that.
Exactly.
Like you say, the colors, the landscape, all of that. So I think that's the beauty of stories. I mean, just in that one simple example of that kid, it opens up a world of possibilities.
Entirely.
And I think it got me stoked, I guess, to about the story and about writing. And I assume with your background, it did the same for you. You just go, okay, look at the possibilities of what I could put
Always
on
possibilities.
Yep.
Yeah.
Blank sheet is fun. I don't.
It's a challenge and it's fun.
It is.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing all that. And I know there's things in there that would make me a better storyteller.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I hope. Yep.
And we'd like to thank our audience as well for joining us here at Ho-Chokeh at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus, where we talk about issues related to Native American education today. Until next time, stay centered.